Hey everyone, welcome back to Mr. Cursed. Today's episode is different. I've got 6 real stories about something truly terrifying, feral people living deep in the Appalachian Mountains. These aren't just scary tales, these are actual encounters that happened to real people this October. Trust me, after hearing these, you'll never look at those dark mountain woods the same way again. But before we dive into the nightmare, hit that subscribe button and smash the like. Share this with your friends if you dare, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you guys. All right, lights off, volume up, let's begin. I'm Linda Hayes, and I've been delivering mail on Route 39 for 16 years now. Same haulers, same families, same 43-mile loop through the mountains of eastern Kentucky. After my divorce back in 2008, this job saved me. Alone time in the truck, steady government paycheck, and I was always home by 3 p.m. for my kids. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I knew every mailbox, every pothole, every family on that route. I thought I knew what to watch out for: dogs, bad weather, the occasional creep. I had no idea what was really out there, watching me back. The route started in town at the post office, wound through some easier neighborhoods, then headed deep into the haulers. The last stop was always Blackberry Fork, the deepest hauler on my route, where 7 mailboxes were spread over 4 miles of gravel road that turned to dirt. The Cahill family lived at the very end. 3 kids, ages 13, 10, and 7. Their mama worked double shifts at the Dollar General, and their daddy was in prison for something I never asked about. Those kids were always waiting at the mailbox when I pulled up, excited about any mail like it was Christmas morning, even if it was just junk flyers. I'd known those kids since they were babies. Emma was 13 now, tall and quiet, always telling me about her grades. Jackson was 10, showed me his drawings every week, mostly dragons and monsters. Little Rosie was 7, and she'd hug my leg every single time I stopped. I brought them candy at Halloween, Christmas cards with $5 bills inside. They were good kids in a bad situation, and those few minutes at the mailbox were the highlight of my day. March 11th changed everything. I pulled up to the Cahill mailbox at 1:47 p.m., same as always. But the kids weren't there. That was strange, they were always there. The mailbox was hanging open, crooked on its post like someone had yanked it. I put the truck in park and got out to fix it. That's when I saw Jackson's shoe inside the mailbox. Just one shoe, a worn-out sneaker, still tied. Like someone had pulled it straight off his foot. My stomach dropped. I drove up to their trailer, gravel crunching under my tires too loud in the silence. The front door was standing open. Emma, Jackson, Rosie, nothing. Their mama's car was gone, she was at work. I called her cell with shaking hands. Linda, what's wrong? She knew something was wrong just from my voice. The kids aren't here, they're not at the mailbox. I found Jackson's shoe. She went dead silent. Then, call 911 right now. Don't go in the woods, don't look for them, just call. The way she said it, like she'd been expecting this, made my blood run cold. Sheriff Harper arrived in 20 minutes with 4 deputies. They searched the woods around the trailer while I stood there useless, shaking. They found a trail, maybe 50 yards into the trees, 3 sets of small footprints heading deeper into the forest, and 4 sets of larger footprints following them. Bare footprints, adult-sized, but wrong. The toes were spread too wide, the arch too flat, like feet that had never worn shoes. The deputies looked at each other, and one of them said something that made my legs go weak. Not again. I grabbed Sheriff Harper's arm. What do you mean, not again? He pulled me aside, away from the other deputies. His face looked 10 years older than it had that morning. Linda, this is the 4th time in 6 years. Kids go missing from the deepest haulers. We search, we find tracks like these, and we never find the kids. We think there are people living in the national forest. Feral people. And some of them are taking children. I must have looked like I was going to pass out because he grabbed my shoulder to steady me. There's a task force, he said quietly. FBI, state police, Forest Service. We've been tracking them for years. We estimate maybe 500 feral individuals scattered across southern Appalachia. Most of them are harmless, just people who want to live off the grid, but the ones in this area, they take children. We've lost 12 kids in this county alone since 2009. Why didn't you tell anyone? I was shouting now, and I didn't care. Why didn't you warn us? Harper looked broken. We tried. FBI classified it. Said public panic would be worse than the threat. Said we couldn't prove it was feral people and not custody disputes or runaways. But we know. Every deputy, every ranger, every mail carrier who works these deep routes, we all know. They're out there. Watching the families, waiting. They launched a massive search that night. Helicopters, search dogs, volunteers from 3 counties. I stayed out there with them, stumbling through the dark woods with a flashlight. Around 3 a.m., maybe 2 miles in, I heard it. A child crying, distant, moving away from us through the trees. "Rosie!" I screamed into the darkness. The crying stopped. Then I heard laughter. Adult laughter, multiple voices, surrounding us in the darkness. The search dogs went crazy, pulling in different directions, barking and whining. Then silence. Complete silence. They'd circled us and vanished like smoke. 48 hours later, there was still no sign of the kids. But we found evidence. A temporary camp about 2 miles into the woods, a fire pit with fresh ashes, animal bones with clean tool marks, and child-sized handprints on trees at waist height, like kids had been led through here holding hands with adults. And scratched into a tree trunk in careful letters. "Ours now." I couldn't sleep. I started researching the other cases Harper had mentioned. 2009, 2 brothers, ages 8 and 11, disappeared from Stony Creek. 2012, a 9-year-old girl from Devil's Fork. 2015, 3 siblings from Troublesome Creek. 2017, twin girls from Lost Fork. 2019, an 8-year-old boy from Frozen Creek. 12 children total, never found. All from the deepest, most isolated hollers. And then I saw the pattern, and my hands started shaking so bad I could barely hold the papers. Every single disappearance happened within 2 miles of a remote mailbox. Every family was isolated, poor, overwhelmed, and every child disappeared between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. after school got out. Before parents came home from work, someone was watching the mail routes, using them to identify vulnerable children, taking them when they were alone and unprotected. I'd been delivering mail to every single one of those addresses. I'd known all those kids. I'd stopped at their mailboxes 5 days a week for years, marking their locations like clockwork. I was the constant, the only outsider who regularly visited the deepest hollers. Had they been watching me? Using my route as a map? Sheriff Harper brought me into the task force briefing room 3 days after the Cahill kids disappeared. FBI agents showed me maps covered in colored dots, red for feral sightings, yellow for child disappearances. The overlap was impossible to ignore. "We believe there are 3 organized groups operating in this region," the lead agent said. She was younger than me, professional, terrifying in her calmness. "We estimate 40 to 60 individuals total. They're nomadic but maintain territories. And they're specifically targeting children." "Why children?" My voice came out as a whisper. The FBI psychologist spoke up. "Adults are harder to control and assimilate. Children are adaptable. If they're building a sustainable feral population, children are the only viable recruits. Take them young, raise them in the forest, and in 1 generation, you've replaced your aging population. It's logical, it's horrifying, but it's rational predatory behavior." The lead agent pulled up photos on a screen. "We've identified 2 cases where taken children were spotted years later. The boy from 2009 was seen in 2016 inches, Virginia, age 15 by. Then, living with a feral group, completely assimilated. He didn't recognize his own name. The girl from 2012, spotted in 2018, same condition. They're not killing these children, Mrs. Hayes. They're converting them." I thought I was going to be sick. "We need your help," the agent continued. "You know these routes better than anyone. You see things we miss. We want to make you a civilian consultant, a trained observer with radio contact. You'd continue your regular mail route, but watch for signs and alert us immediately to suspicious activity. You'd be our early warning system." What else could I do? Those Cahill kids were out there somewhere, maybe alive, maybe being taught to live like animals. I couldn't just sit home knowing that. Harper gave me a radio, trained me on what to watch for scratch marks on trees, stacks of stones, carved symbols, barefoot tracks, unusual animal remains. I became a spy on my own mail route. Within a week, I started seeing them. The markers, mailboxes with 3 parallel scratches on the posts, trees near remote driveways carved with symbols I didn't recognize, and gifts left for me, dead rabbits hung on mailbox flags by their feet, bird skulls balanced carefully on posts, wildflowers tied to boxes with what looked like human hair. They knew I was watching, and they were watching back. In May, I pulled up to a mailbox in Ridgeway Hollow. The Patterson family, 2 kids, ages 9 and 12. Both kids were there, but the girl grabbed my arm through the truck window. "Miss Linda," she whispered, looking over her shoulder at the tree line. "There's people in the woods. We see them every day now. They stand at the edge and watch our house. Mama says we're imagining it, but we're not." I radioed the task force immediately. They set up surveillance trail cameras hidden in the woods, undercover rangers, me continuing my normal route like nothing was wrong. For 3 days, nothing. Then on day 4, the cameras caught them. 6 figures moving through the woods toward the Patterson trailer. Pale, thin, moving wrong, too fluid, too careful. They circled the house 3 times, then disappeared. They were studying it. Planning. The task force deployed motion-activated sirens and lights around the Patterson property that night. Aggressive deterrent strategy. Within hours, the ferals triggered them repeatedly. Not running away, testing them, learning. By dawn, they'd disabled 2 of the devices. They were tool users, problem solvers, intelligent. The next day, I found a piece of bark in the Patterson mailbox with words scratched into it in perfect handwriting. "Mail woman, stop. Children are ours. You take them, we take yours." Then my home address, written out complete with zip code. They knew where I lived. They knew I had 2 kids of my own. I pulled my kids out of school that afternoon and drove them to my sister's house in Lexington. My son was 16, old enough to know I was lying when I said it was for a special work assignment. My daughter was 14 and cried the whole way. I left them there and drove back to Breathitt County alone because the Cahill kids and the Patterson kids needed someone who wouldn't give up. But I was terrified every single moment. In June, despite everything, the cameras, the lights, the constant surveillance, they took the Patterson children. The parents had gone to town for groceries, left the kids home for 90 minutes. When they returned, both children were gone. Front door standing open, TV still on, lunch half-eaten on the table. We found barefoot tracks and a trail of small shoes leading into the forest. The kids had been walked out, not carried. They'd gone willingly or been coerced without violence. The ferals had simply waited us out. Let us set up all our defenses, then waited until the parents made one mistake. We couldn't protect every child every moment. The ferals had infinite patience. We didn't. The FBI brought in 30 more agents. Military-grade surveillance equipment. Drones with thermal imaging. They were going to flood the forest, find the camps, raid them, extract the children. "This ends now," the lead agent said. 200 people combed 50 square miles of Daniel Boone National Forest over the next week. We found 3 abandoned camps recent. Within days. Signs of habitation, children's clothing scattered around, food scraps. But no people. They'd evacuated before we arrived. We found out later one of the deputies had a brother, a meth addict who'd been living rough in the woods. The ferals had recruited him as a lookout, and he'd been feeding them information about all our operations. When we arrested him, he just laughed. "You can't stop them, they're smarter than you. They were here before roads, before towns, they'll be here after. Those kids are theirs now." In July, a man walked into the sheriff's office at 10 a.m. Filthy, barefoot, thin as a rail. But he spoke perfect English. "I'm Daniel, I represent the forest people. We want to negotiate." Harper almost shot him right there. I convinced him to listen. Daniel explained that his group, he called them the families, had been living in the forest for generations. Some were descended from people who'd fled civilization decades ago. Others were runaways, addicts, people who couldn't or wouldn't live in normal society. They had their own culture, their own rules. "We take children because we're dying out," Daniel said simply. "We're too inbred, too isolated. We need new blood. We're not monsters. We care for them, teach them, raise them as our own. They're happier with us than in broken homes with absent parents." "Give us back those children," Harper said, his hand on his gun. Daniel shook his head. They're ours now. They're being taught, integrated. Within a year, they won't remember their old lives, but we're willing to stop taking more. Leave us alone, stop searching for us, and we'll leave your families alone. Keep sending agents into our forest, and we'll take more children. It's your choice. That's not a negotiation, I said. That's terrorism. That's survival, Daniel replied. He stood up. You have 1 week to decide. After that, we assume the answer is no, and we go back to what works. He walked out. We couldn't stop him. He knew it, we knew it. He disappeared into the forest, and when agents tried to follow him, he vanished like he'd never existed. The FBI wanted to refuse, launch a massive operation, wipe out every feral group in the region. But the state officials were terrified of public panic if the story got out. In the end, they made the deal. Unofficially, quietly, the task force was scaled back. Patrols were reduced to normal levels. In exchange, the disappearances stopped. I wanted to quit. I wanted to leave Breathitt County and never come back. But I kept delivering mail because someone needed to keep watching, needed to remember those 12 children who were never coming home. That was 4 years ago. The Cahill kids are... Back when I was about 48, my wife Carol died. Cancer. It took 8 months from diagnosis to the end. Our 3 kids, all grown by then, living their own lives, they helped me through it. But once the funeral was done and everyone went back to their normal routines, I was alone in a house that felt too big and too quiet. I needed something to do with my time, something to keep me from just sitting in that empty living room staring at the TV. So I got a job delivering groceries for Save Mart. Pays $12 an hour, which isn't much, but I wasn't doing it for the money. I'm 52 now, been at it for 8 years. This job saved me, in a way. Kept me moving, talking to people, feeling useful. My route covers Mingo County, West Virginia. If you've never heard of it, that's because there's nothing much to hear about. Poorest county in the state. I deliver to people who can't leave their homes, elderly folks, disabled people, families without reliable cars. 40 stops a day scattered across 150 miles of mountain roads. Some customers I see every single week, and you get to know them. Mrs. Patterson, 73, wheelchair-bound, always has her little dog yapping at the door. Mr. Chen, 81, fought in Vietnam, tells me the same stories every visit and I listen like it's the first time. It's good work. Honest work makes you feel like you matter. February of this year, I started noticing something weird. Items were going missing from deliveries. Not from my truck, I'm careful about that, but from customers' porches after I dropped them off. Mrs. Patterson called the Save Mart customer service line first. Said she'd ordered groceries. I delivered them around noon, but when her daughter came by at 6 to help bring them inside, the bags were gone. I checked the delivery photos on my phone. I take a picture of every order as proof of delivery, and there they were, 6 bags on her porch, timestamp 11:47 a.m. 3 more reports came in that same week. All the same story. I'd deliver, take my photo, leave. Hours later, the groceries would be gone. Motion-activated security cameras at 2 of the properties caught me making the deliveries, then nothing until the homeowners came outside and found empty porches. The weird part? All 4 properties were remote. End of long dirt driveways, no neighbors within shouting distance, all backing up to national forest land. And all 4 customers were elderly or disabled people who couldn't immediately bring groceries inside when I delivered. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting until the customers went back inside, then stealing the food. I decided to stake out Mrs. Patterson's place. Told her I'd wait nearby after the next delivery, see if I could catch whoever was doing this. She lives about 40 minutes from the main highway, last house on a gravel road that dead ends at the tree line. On March 3rd, I delivered her order around 1 in the afternoon. 6 bags, mostly canned goods and frozen dinners. Took my photo, then drove my truck about 200 yards down the road and parked behind some overgrown bushes where I could still see her porch. I waited 2 hours. Was about to give up when I saw them. 3 people came out of the woods. Just walked right out of the tree line like it was the most natural thing in the world. 2 men and a woman, all wearing layered clothes that looked worn and dirty even from that distance. They walked straight to Mrs. Patterson's porch, picked up all 6 grocery bags, and walked back into the forest. I jumped out of my truck yelling, "Hey, stop!" Stupid thing to do, probably. They ran. I chased them into the woods. I'm not a young man, and I'm not in great shape, but anger can make you forget that for a while. These people were stealing from a 3-year-old woman in a wheelchair. I followed them maybe 300 yards before my lungs gave out, and I lost sight of them. But I found their trail. A path worn into the forest floor, narrow but clear, heading deeper into the trees. The rational part of my brain said, "Turn around, go back to your truck, call the police." But I kept thinking about Mrs. Patterson waiting for groceries that were never going to come, groceries she'd paid for with her fixed income. So I followed the trail. Half a mile in, I found their camp. It wasn't like a homeless camp you'd see under a highway overpass. This was a settlement, 10 structures built from tarps, scavenged plywood, and tree branches. A central fire pit surrounded by stumps used as seats. Food hanging in bags from tree branches to keep it away from animals. Water collection barrels. A clothesline. I could see 8 people scattered around the area, including the 3 who'd taken the groceries. They were dividing up Mrs. Patterson's food into smaller portions. I walked right into the middle of their camp. Everyone froze. One man, maybe 40, stood up from where he'd been sorting canned goods. He didn't look threatening, just tired. "That food," I said, "was for Mrs. Patterson. She needs it." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "She gets government assistance. She'll get more food. We get nothing. We need it more than she does." I was stunned by the logic of it, like he'd thought it through and justified it completely. "So you're just stealing from disabled people to survive?" "We don't rob people," he said. His voice was calm, matter of fact. "We don't go into homes. We don't threaten anyone. We just take what's left unattended. There's 12 of us living out here. Can't get jobs, no addresses, no transportation, no child care. Can't get food assistance, need paperwork we don't have. Need to prove residency we can't prove. We hunt and forage, but it's not enough, especially in winter. So we take from deliveries. It's the only way we survive." I looked around the camp more carefully, saw 3 children. Skinny kids with dirty faces, wearing clothes too big for them, sitting very quietly, near one of the shelters. A woman nursing an infant under a tarp. An elderly man with a cough that sounded bad, really bad. These weren't criminals. They were destitute people living like it was 1850, hiding in the woods because society had failed them so completely they'd fallen through every crack. "What if I brought you groceries directly?" The words came out before I'd fully thought them through. Save Mart throws out damaged goods, expired items, stuff that can't be sold. I could bring it here instead of to the dumpster. The man, his name was Caleb, I learned later, looked suspicious. "Why would you help us?" "Because you've got kids here," I said, looking at those 3 quiet children. "And I'm a father. I can't stand the thought of kids going hungry when I'm throwing away perfectly good food every single day." It really was that simple in my mind. Corporate waste versus hungry children. Not a hard choice. I started bringing them food twice a week. Bread past the sell-by date. Dented cans, bruised produce. Save Mart's policy was to trash it all, claim it as loss, write it off. I brought it to the camp instead. It wasn't enough to fully feed 12 people, but it supplemented their hunting and foraging. The kids started looking healthier. The elderly man's cough got better once he had regular meals. Then Caleb told me about the other camps. "We're not alone out here," he said. 6 groups within 10 miles, maybe 70 people total living in the forest. All in the same situation, no resources, no access to assistance, surviving however we can. I asked if they'd want food deliveries too. He said yes. So I mapped out all 6 camps, started routing my deliveries to hit them between official stops. Brought expired food, first aid supplies, blankets, anything Save Mart was discarding. I was running an underground food bank for people living feral in the West Virginia woods. They'd leave me gifts in return. Hand-carved items, foraged, mushrooms, deer meat from successful hunts. Fair trades in their eyes. I was saving their lives and they were giving what they could. It felt more meaningful than any official job I'd ever had. It lasted 3 months before I got caught. My supervisor noticed discrepancies in May. "Marcus, your route takes 3 hours longer than it should, and we're missing more inventory than we can account for. What's going on?" I lied. said I was adding extra customer service, helping elderly folks put their groceries away, checking on them. He didn't believe me, but let it slide. Then corporate sent auditors. They tracked every item, every minute of delivery time. Found I was consistently losing 15 to 20% of expired inventory and adding 2 hours to my route every day. I was called into a meeting with 3 people I'd never seen before, sitting behind a table with printed spreadsheets. I told them everything. I'm feeding hungry people with food you're throwing away anyway. It's waste otherwise. I'm doing a good thing. The woman in the middle, some regional manager, looked at me like I was insane. You're stealing company property and using company time for unauthorized activities. You're fired. At 52, I lost my job for feeding hungry people. Couldn't even get unemployment termination for cause. My kids helped with bills, which was humiliating. But what devastated me wasn't losing the job. It was losing access to the food those 70 people depended on. Without my deliveries, the camps went back to stealing from porches. But now they were desperate, hitting multiple houses per day, taking everything left unattended. Customer complaints skyrocketed. Police presence increased. In June, a homeowner caught someone taking groceries and shot him in the leg. The man escaped into the woods. No ambulance was called, they couldn't risk exposure. I heard about it through Caleb. The man nearly died from blood loss. So I started buying damaged and the expired food from discount stores with my own money. Brought it to the camps myself. I couldn't just let them starve or get shot. I visited all 6 camps, met all 70 people. Each group had a different story. Caleb's were former coal miners whose industry died and left them with nothing. Another group were people fleeing domestic violence with nowhere else to go. One group were mentally ill people who'd been institutionalized, then released with no support system when the facility closed. All had ended up feral through systematic failure, not personal choice. There were 14 kids total across 6 camps. Ages infant to 15, none in school, most born in the woods. They were being raised feral by circumstance, not by choice. Their parents wanted better but had no pathway to it. I called a meeting with all 6 group leaders. What if we organize? I said. What if we create a formal community, apply for nonprofit status, access real resources? You can't hide forever. Let me help you integrate legally. They were skeptical but desperate enough to try. We formed Mountain Mutual Aid Collective. I used my house as the mailing address. We applied for 501(c)(3) status, filed for group assistance, housing vouchers, job training programs. It took 6 months of paperwork and phone calls and meetings, but we got approved. Not everyone wanted integration, though. Half of Caleb's group refused. We don't want the government's help, one woman told me. Every time we've tried that system, it's destroyed us. We're staying in the woods. I couldn't force them. The community split. 35 people chose integration. We got them into housing trailers on cheap land, subsidized rent, got them IDs, got the kids enrolled in school, got adults into job training. It was chaos. People who'd lived wild for years suddenly trying to navigate bureaucracy, rental agreements, social workers, school systems. 5 couldn't adapt. Left the housing after 2 months, went back to the woods. Said it was too loud, too confined, too controlled. They'd been feral too long. Integration was impossible for them. The other 30 struggled but persisted. 6 months in, 22 of the original 30 were still housed. 8 had returned to the woods, but 22 was a success. Kids were in school. Adults had jobs, mostly labor work, but they were employed. They were surviving in society again. 35 people remained feral by choice or inability to adapt. I still brought them food, now fundraised through the nonprofit, kept them fed, safe, hidden. They wanted to be left alone. I respected that. Then winter hit hard. Caleb got pneumonia. I begged him to go to a hospital. He refused. I'd rather die free, he said, than be forced back into the system that already failed me twice. He died in his shelter. He was 43. A completely treatable condition, but he wouldn't budge. I grieved him like a brother. After his death, social services investigated. Found children living in the woods. Removed them from their families, placed them in foster care. The parents were devastated. One mother screamed at me, "You brought the government here. You destroyed us. Half the remaining feral people blamed me for the child removal. Name's Marcus Webb. I'm 52, been delivering groceries for Save Mart for 8 years now. After my wife died, I needed something to do with my time. Kids are grown, house is empty, and sitting around just made everything worse. This job keeps me moving, talking to people, feeling useful. I drive through Mingo County, West Virginia, poorest county in the state, delivering to folks who can't leave their homes. Elderly people, disabled folks, people without cars. 40 stops per day, scattered across 150 miles of mountain roads. Some customers I see every week, and we've become friends. They tell me about their grandkids, their health problems, their lives. It's good work. Honest work. At least, it was. The route takes me to places most people don't even know exist. Houses at the end of long gravel driveways, trailers tucked into hollows where cell service dies, cabins so deep in the woods you'd swear nobody lived there until you see the mailbox. I've been doing this long enough that I know every turn, every pothole, every house where the dog's going to bark at me. I know which customers need help carrying bags inside, which ones want to chat for 10 minutes, which ones just want their groceries left on the porch. It's routine. It's safe. It's what I needed after everything fell apart. But this February, things started getting strange. First, it was Mrs. Patterson. She's 73, wheelchair-bound, lives alone in a house about 2 miles off Route 52. I dropped off her groceries on a Tuesday morning, like always, set them on her porch, rang the bell, waited to make sure she got them okay. She rolled to the door, waved at me through the window. I waved back and left. That afternoon, she called Save Mart. Her groceries were gone. Porch was empty. She thought maybe I forgot to deliver them, but I knew I hadn't. I'd seen her at the window. Then it happened at Mr. Chen's place, then at the Morrison's trailer, then at old Bill Hedrick's cabin. 4 customers in 1 week, all reporting the same thing. I'd deliver groceries, they'd go inside for a few minutes, and when they came back out to bring everything in, the bags were gone. At first, my supervisor thought I was stealing, accused me of it right to my face. I told him to check the customer's security cameras, and when he did, he saw the truth. The footage showed me dropping off groceries, driving away, and then hours later, sometimes just 30 minutes later, the bags would vanish. The weird part was the pattern. All 4 properties were remote, end of long driveways, no neighbors, all of them bordering national forest land. And all 4 customers were elderly or disabled people who couldn't bring their groceries inside right away. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting until the customers went back inside, then stealing from vulnerable people. I started feeling sick about it. These folks I delivered to, they trusted me, they depended on me, and someone was using my deliveries to rob them. So, at Mrs. Patterson's house the following Tuesday, I decided to wait. After I dropped off her groceries and saw her at the window, I drove down the driveway like normal. But instead of leaving, I pulled off onto a little access road about 200 yards away, where I could still see her house through the trees. I sat there in my truck with the engine off, watching her porch. 2 hours passed. I was starting to think I'd wasted my time. Then I saw them. 3 people came out of the woods behind her house. 2 men and a woman, all of them thin and dirty, wearing clothes that looked like they'd been worn for months. They didn't sneak. They just walked straight across her backyard to the porch, picked up the grocery bags, and walked back into the forest. Bold as day, like they'd done it 100 times. I jumped out of my truck and ran toward them, yelling, "Hey, stop!" They looked back at me and ran. I chased them into the woods without thinking, just pure anger pushing me forward. These people were stealing from a 73-year-old woman in a wheelchair. I was going to catch them and make them answer for it. But they were fast, and they knew the terrain. I followed them maybe 300 yards before I lost sight of them completely. I stood there in the woods, breathing hard, surrounded by bare trees and dead leaves. I was about to turn back when I noticed something. A path. Not a hiking trail, a path worn into the forest floor by repeated foot traffic, heading deeper into the trees. I should have left. I should have called the police. But I was so angry and so tired of feeling helpless that I followed the path instead. Half a mile in, I found their camp. It wasn't like anything I expected. This wasn't some homeless person's tent under a bridge. This was a settlement. 10 structures built from scavenged materials: tarps, plywood, corrugated metal, pallets, a fire pit with stones arranged around it, food hanging in bags from tree branches to keep animals away, a water collection system made from rain gutters and plastic containers. And there, sitting by the fire pit, were my grocery bags. 8 people were dividing up the contents: Mrs. Patterson's frozen dinners, her bread, her canned soup, her milk. I walked right into the middle of their camp. Everyone stopped and stared at me. Nobody ran this time. One man, maybe 40 years old, with a thick beard and hollow eyes, stood up slowly. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "That food was for Mrs. Patterson," I said. "She's 73 years old. She can't walk. She needs that food." "She gets government assistance," the man said. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "She'll get more food next week. We get nothing. We need it more than she does." I was stunned. The logic of it, the audacity. "So you're just stealing from disabled people to survive?" "We're not stealing from people," he said. "We're taking food that's left unattended. There's a difference." I looked around. The camp. Really looked. There were children there. 3 of them that I could see, skinny and dirty, sitting quietly by one of the shelters. A woman nursing an infant. An old man coughing into his hand, a wet rattling sound that made my chest hurt just hearing it. These people weren't criminals. They were destitute. They were living like it was 1850, surviving in the woods because they had nowhere else to go. "How many of you are there?" I asked. The man, he told me his name was Caleb, said there were 12 in his group. Then he told me about the others. 5 more camps within 10 miles. Maybe 70 people total, all living in the national forest, all surviving however they could. Some were former coal miners whose industry died. Others were people fleeing bad situations with no resources. Some were mentally ill folks who'd been released from institutions with nowhere to go. They'd all ended up here because the system had failed them completely. "We don't want to steal," Caleb said. "But we've got kids here, and I've watched my son go hungry. So yeah, when we see groceries sitting on a porch for hours, we take them. Because it's that or starve." I should have left. Should have reported them. Instead, I heard myself saying, "What if I brought you groceries directly?" Caleb looked at me like I was insane. "Why the hell would you do that?" "Because Save Mart throws out food every day," I said. "Bread that's past the sell-by date, dented cans, bruised produce. It's all perfectly good, but corporate policy says we trash it. What if I brought it here instead? Why would you help us?" "Because you've got kids here," I said, "and I'm a father. I can't stand the thought of kids going hungry when I'm throwing away food every day." That's how it started. Twice a week, I'd load up the expired and damaged goods that Save Mart was going to trash anyway, and I'd bring them to Caleb's camp. It wasn't enough to fully feed 12 people, but I helped. Then Caleb told me about the other camps, and I started visiting them too. I mapped out all 6 groups and worked them into my route. Between my official stops, I'd disappear into the woods with bags of food, first aid supplies, blankets, anything Save Mart was discarding that these people could use. They'd leave gifts for me. Hand-carved items, foraged mushrooms, sometimes wild turkey or deer meat. Fair trades in their eyes. I was saving their lives, and they were giving back what they could. For the first time since my wife died, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. Something more important than just delivering groceries to people who could afford them. The thing is, when you're doing something good, you forget that good doesn't always look legal. In May, my supervisor called me into his office. "Marcus, your route takes 3 hours longer than it should. And we're showing inventory discrepancies. A lot of expired goods aren't making it to the dumpster." "What's going on?" I lied. Told him I was providing extra customer service, helping elderly people put their groceries away. He didn't believe me, but he let it slide. Until corporate sent auditors, they tracked everything. Every item, every minute of my route, found that I was consistently losing 15–20% of expired inventory and adding 2 hours to my delivery time every single day. They called me in for a meeting with 3 people I'd never met before, all wearing suits, all looking at me like I was a criminal. I told them the truth. "I'm feeding hungry people with food you're throwing away. It's waste otherwise. I'm doing a good thing." "You're stealing company property," one of them said, "and using company time for unauthorized activities. You're fired." At 52 years old, I lost my job for feeding hungry children. Couldn't even get unemployment because it was termination for cause. My grown kids helped me with bills, but the money wasn't what devastated me. It was knowing that 70 people in the woods had just lost their food supply. Without my deliveries, the camps went back to stealing. But now they were desperate. They hit multiple houses per day, took everything left unattended, customer complaints increased, police presence increased, and then someone got shot. A homeowner caught one of Caleb's people taking groceries off his porch and pulled a gun. Shot the man in the leg. The guy escaped back into the woods, but he nearly died from blood loss. They couldn't risk calling an ambulance, couldn't risk exposure. I only heard about it because Caleb managed to get word to me through someone who knew someone. I couldn't let them starve or... Back when I was 28, I took a job maintaining fire towers for the State Forestry Service in eastern Kentucky. I'd just gotten out of a messy divorce and needed something that would keep me busy and far away from people for a while. The pay wasn't much, but it came with a small cabin about 15 miles outside a town called Copper Ridge, population maybe 400 on a good day. Most people think fire tower jobs are all about watching for smoke, but really it's a lot of radio checks, equipment maintenance, and hiking the same trails over and over to make sure everything's working right. I figured it would be peaceful, quiet, just me, the woods, and plenty of time to get my head straight. Copper Ridge sits in a valley surrounded by these old, worn-down mountains that have been there longer than anyone can remember. The kind of place where the fog hangs low in the mornings and you can smell the dampness even when it hasn't rained in days. My cabin was basic but comfortable. One bedroom, a small kitchen, and a wood-burning stove that kept things warm enough during the colder months. The nearest neighbor was Mrs. Henley, an older woman who lived about 2 miles down the dirt road in a house that looked like it had been there since the 1800s. She'd wave when I drove past, but we didn't talk much beyond the occasional morning when I'd stop by the general store in town. The fire tower I was responsible for stood on Hawks Peak, about a 40-minute hike up a well-marked trail. It was one of those old metal towers, maybe 60 feet tall, with a small cabin at the top where the equipment was housed. Every few days, I'd make the climb to check the radio, clean the windows, and make sure the solar panels that powered everything were clear of debris. The view from up there was something else. You could see for miles across the valley, all the way to the next ridge. On clear days, it felt like you were on top of the world. For the first few weeks, everything went exactly like I'd hoped. I'd wake up around 6, have coffee on the porch while listening to the birds wake up, then head out for whatever maintenance needed doing. Some days I'd hike to the tower, other days I'd walk the fire breaks to make sure they were clear, or check on the weather monitoring equipment scattered around my sector. Evenings were for reading, cooking simple meals, and enjoying the kind of quiet you can't get anywhere near a city. I was starting to feel human again. But then I started noticing things. It began with the feeling that someone was watching me. You know that prickly sensation on the back of your neck when you're sure someone's looking at you? I'd get that while working around the cabin or hiking the trails, and I'd turn around expecting to see another hiker or maybe a hunter, but there was never anyone there. Just trees and shadows and the sound of wind through the leaves. Then I started finding things moved around. Small stuff at first. A tool I was sure I'd left on the porch would be sitting on the hood of my truck the next morning. A stack of firewood I'd arranged one way would be rearranged slightly different the next day. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make me wonder if I was remembering things wrong. I figured maybe it was animals getting into stuff, or the wind, or just me being more scattered than I thought. The first time I saw him was on a Wednesday afternoon in late October. I was coming down from the tower after replacing a burned-out bulb in the beacon when I caught movement in my peripheral vision. About 50 yards off the trail, standing perfectly still between 2 big oak trees, was a man in dark clothing. He was too far away for me to make out his face, but something about the way he stood, completely motionless, like he'd been there for hours, made my skin crawl. I called out, "Hello," but got no response. When I looked again a few seconds later, he was gone. I convinced myself it was probably just a local hunter or maybe someone else who worked for the Forestry Service. But over the next week, I saw him 2 more times, always at a distance, always perfectly still, always gone when I looked again. And each time, I got that same sick feeling in my stomach, like something was very wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The radio calls started the following Monday. I'd be sitting in the cabin or working outside, and my handheld radio would crackle to life with what sounded like someone trying to speak, but the words were too distorted to understand. Just static, and something that might have been a voice underneath it. I'd try to respond, asking for identification or repeating my call sign, but I never got a clear answer back. When I mentioned it to my supervisor during our weekly check-in, he said they hadn't had any reports of radio problems and suggested I bring the unit in for testing. But it wasn't just my radio. The equipment up in the tower started acting up too. The weather monitoring system would show impossible readings, temperatures of -40 degrees in 70-degree weather, wind speeds that would indicate a hurricane when there wasn't even a breeze. The beacon light began turning on and off randomly during the day, sometimes flashing in patterns that almost seemed deliberate. I'd climb up to check the connections and everything would look fine, but an hour later it would start up again. The worst part was the sound I started hearing at night. It began as what I thought might be wind chimes, a soft metallic ringing that seemed to come from somewhere in the woods around the cabin. But wind chimes have a random, chaotic sound, and this was different. This had a rhythm to it, almost like someone tapping out a message in Morse code. It would start around midnight and continue for hours, just at the edge of my hearing, loud enough to keep me awake, but quiet enough that I couldn't be sure I wasn't imagining it. I started sleeping with a flashlight next to my bed and a baseball bat leaning against the nightstand. Every time I heard that metallic ringing, I'd get up and scan the woods with the light, but I never saw anything except trees and darkness staring back at me. Things came to a head on a Thursday night in early November. I'd been lying awake listening to that damned ringing for over an hour when I heard footsteps on my porch. Not the light scuffling of an animal, but the deliberate, measured steps of a person trying to be quiet. My heart started pounding as I grabbed the flashlight and crept toward the front window. Through the curtains, I could see a dark shape moving back and forth across the porch. It would pace from one end to the other, stop for a few seconds, then pace back. The footsteps were perfectly timed, like someone marching. I watched this go on for maybe 10 minutes before working up the courage to turn on the porch light. The shape stopped moving immediately. For a long moment, everything was completely silent. Then I heard a single, loud knock on the front door. I grabbed the baseball bat and positioned myself where I could see the door, but wouldn't be directly in front of it if someone tried to break in. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Another knock, same intensity, same duration. "I'm armed," I said, which was a lie but seemed like the right thing to say. "If you don't identify yourself, I'm calling the police." That's when I heard the voice. It came from right outside the door, so close that whoever was speaking could have been leaning against it. But the voice wasn't quite right. It sounded like someone trying to imitate human speech but not quite getting it right. Too flat, too precise. "Open the door," it said. "I need to come in." Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to do that. "Who are you?" I asked. "What do you want?" "I've been watching you," the voice said. "I need to come in now." I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only a few minutes, bat in hand, waiting for the sound of breaking glass or splintering wood, but nothing happened. Eventually, I heard footsteps moving away from the door, across the porch, and down the steps. I waited until dawn before I dared to look outside. There was no sign that anyone had been there, no footprints in the soft dirt around the porch, no scuff marks on the wooden steps. But scratched into the paint of my front door, right at eye level, was a symbol I didn't recognize. It looked like a circle with lines radiating out from it, almost like a child's drawing of the sun, but wrong somehow. The lines were too sharp, the proportions off in a way that made it uncomfortable to look at. I called my supervisor that morning and told him I was taking some personal time. I didn't give him details, just said I had a family emergency and needed to be away for a few days. I threw some clothes in a bag, got in my truck, and drove straight to Lexington to stay with a friend. I figured a few days away would give me some perspective, help me figure out what was real and what was just isolation getting to me. But even in the city, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I'd catch glimpses of dark shapes in my peripheral vision, hear that same metallic ringing late at night, and wake up with the absolute certainty that someone had been watching me sleep. After a week, I realized the problem hadn't been the cabin or the woods. The problem was me, or something that had attached itself to me. I never went back to Copper Ridge. I called my supervisor and quit over the phone, told him to mail my last paycheck and that someone else could deal with getting my stuff out of the cabin. I've worked a dozen different jobs since then, lived in 4 different states, but I still hear that ringing sometimes in the middle of the night. And sometimes, when I'm walking down a crowded street or sitting in a grata coffee shop, I'll see him in my peripheral vision, that same dark figure standing perfectly still, watching. Looking back, I think I stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to see. Maybe that forest has things living in it that don't like being disturbed. Or maybe there are places in these old mountains where the rules work differently. I don't know. What I do know is that some jobs aren't worth any amount of money, and some kinds of quiet come with a price you don't realize you're paying until it's too late. I live in suburbs now, where there's always traffic and neighbors and people around. I tell myself I like the convenience, but really, I just can't handle being alone in quiet places anymore. Not after Copper Ridge. Not after learning that sometimes, when you're sure someone's watching you, you're absolutely right. I'm Jake Morrison, and I've been a paramedic in Harlan County, Kentucky for 11 years now. I'm 34, single, and I've dedicated my life to this work: overdoses, car wrecks, domestic violence, the kind of poverty-related illness that makes your stomach turn. It's brutal work, the kind that chews people up and spits them out. But every life you save makes it worthwhile. I've saved 127 lives. I count every single one. Harlan County is extreme rural, one of those economically devastated coal regions where hope went to die. We cover 467 square miles with 1 ambulance and 4 paramedics on rotation. Response times to remote areas can be 45 minutes or more. People die waiting for us, and there's nothing we can do about it except drive faster. August 4th changed everything. The call came in at 11:47 a.m. Dispatch said, "Unresponsive male, unknown age, found near Coal Creek Trail. Caller says he's unconscious, bleeding, non-responsive." They gave us coordinates. My partner Danielle and I rolled out immediately. Coal Creek was deep in the forest, no road access. We'd have to hike in with all our equipment. We parked at the trailhead, loaded up the backboard and trauma bag, and hiked 20 minutes through thick August heat. When we reached the coordinates, we found a man lying on the ground, maybe 40 years old, extremely thin, wearing torn jeans and no shirt. He was unconscious with severe head trauma and a weak pulse, and there was a girl hovering over him. Teenage, also thin and dirty, crying and touching his face. I assessed the patient fast. Depressed skull fracture, likely subdural hematoma. Critical. He'd be dead within hours without surgery. We stabilized his spine, loaded him onto the backboard, and started carrying him out. The girl followed us, crying, making these clicking sounds, and speaking in a language I didn't recognize. Danielle tried to calm her down, but the girl didn't understand English. She responded to tone, but not words. She kept touching the man's hand, making those clicking sounds that might have been words in her language. She followed us all the way back to the ambulance. We radioed ahead for trauma team activation. The girl insisted on riding with us, and I let her. She was clearly attached to the patient, probably family, and I needed information. Where did he fall? How long was he unconscious? But she couldn't answer anything. At the hospital, we transferred him to the ER trauma team. The prognosis was grim, severe brain bleed, needed immediate surgery. The girl stayed in the waiting room, terrified. A social worker tried to get information from her. No ID, no address, no emergency contact. The girl just rocked back and forth, those clicking sounds continuous. The patient survived surgery but went into a coma. Doctors gave him a 50/50 chance of recovery. The girl refused to leave. Hospital security tried to remove her, and she fought back, bit a guard, barricaded herself in the patient's room. They called me back to help de-escalate. I went in alone, spoke softly, used gestures. Eventually she calmed down. Through pointing and repetition, I learned her name, May. The patient was her father. They lived in the woods. He'd fallen from a tree while foraging, and she dragged him to the trail and flagged down a hiker who called 911. She'd saved his life by getting him to us. That's when things got really strange. Hospital social services launched an investigation. Who were these people? Where did they actually live? May had no birth certificate, no social security number, no records at all. She'd never seen a doctor, never been to school. She was approximately 15 years old and completely undocumented. It was like she didn't exist. Through gestures and the few basic English words May did know, we learned something impossible. She and her father were part of a larger group, 23 people living in the forest. She was born out there, never knew any other life. Her father was the group's leader and hunter. Without him, the group might not survive. May made it clear through desperate gestures that her people needed help. Others were sick, injured, hungry. She wanted me to come to them, bring medicine, help them like I'd helped her father. It was against every protocol we had, but how could I refuse? I asked my supervisor for permission to do a welfare check on May's community. He shut me down immediately. Absolutely not. We're EMS, not social services. Besides, if there's a hidden population out there, that's a law enforcement matter. I dropped it officially, but I couldn't let it go. I took a personal day. May guided me 7 miles into the national forest, through terrain I didn't know existed. We reached the camp around noon. 23 people emerged from shelters made of tarps and branches, men, women, children, all thin, all wary, all looking at me like I was an alien, or like they were. I'd brought basic supplies in my personal medic bag. I did visual assessments on everyone who'd let me get close. 3 people with infected wounds, 2 with obvious respiratory infections, 1 child with a badly healed broken arm, 1 elderly woman with edema suggesting heart failure, multiple people with tooth abscesses, easily 15 medical emergencies by any clinical standard. They spoke their own language, this mix of English, clicking sounds, and gestures. May translated the basics. I learned they'd been living here for 12 years. Started as 7 people who'd lost everything in the coal industry collapse, grew through others joining and children being born. They didn't trust hospitals, didn't trust authorities, didn't trust anyone. I treated what I could with the supplies I had. Cleaned wounds, gave antibiotics from my personal stockpile, showed them basic wound care. The elderly woman with heart failure needed hospitalization. They refused. An older man named Seth told me, "She dies here with us or in your hospital alone. She chooses here." There were 6 kids in the camp, ages 3 to 14, all born in the forest. May was the oldest. None of them had ever seen a town, been in a vehicle, or spoken to anyone outside their community except me. They watched me with huge eyes, fascinated and terrified at the same time. Before I left, Seth spoke for the group. "Will you come back? Will you help us stay alive? We don't want to leave. We just want to not die from simple things." I promised I'd return monthly. It was a promise that would ruin my life. I started going every month, always on personal time, always alone. Brought medical supplies bought with my own money. Treated infections, injuries, chronic conditions. Kept detailed notes in a journal I hid at home. Watched as people who would have died survived through basic interventions. 3 weeks after the initial call, May's father regained consciousness in the hospital. Partial paralysis, speech impaired, but alive. The hospital wanted to transfer him to long-term care. He refused, kept trying to leave. Finally, I arranged a discharge against medical advice. May and Seth came for him. We took him back to the forest in my personal truck. I visited him weekly after that, did physical therapy, monitored his recovery. In the forest, with his people, he improved faster than expected. Within 3 months, he was walking with a cane. Partially paralyzed but functional. He thanked me in broken English. "You save family." Seth told me about 3 other groups in neighboring areas. Total population, maybe 80 people living rough in southeastern Kentucky. All had medical needs, all distrusted hospitals. "Would you help them too?" I said yes. My monthly visits became weekly visits to multiple camps. Over 6 months, I treated 63 people. Set broken bones, treated pneumonia, delivered a baby in the dirt, removed an infected appendix with veterinary tools in the most terrifying moment of my career. I was practicing medicine far beyond my scope as a paramedic. I knew it. I did it anyway. Danielle noticed my exhaustion, my mysterious absences. She confronted me. I told her everything, expecting her to report me. Instead, she said, "Take me with you. You need backup and proper equipment. With Danielle helping, we could do more. Brought portable ultrasound, better medications, more advanced equipment. We saved a man having a heart attack, treated a teenager with diabetic ketoacidosis, managed a woman with preeclampsia. We became their entire healthcare system. We were also spending thousands of our own money on supplies, working exhausted, lying to our supervisors, practicing medicine illegally. But the alternative was letting people die from treatable conditions. The math seemed clear, until Danielle raised the children issue. There are 15 kids out here with no access to education, no dental care, no vaccinations. Are we helping them by enabling their parents to keep them hidden? Or are we hurting them? I didn't have an answer. We argued with Seth and the other leaders. Your kids need school, need socialization, need futures beyond subsistence survival. Seth countered. Our kids have freedom, nature, community, skills your schools don't teach. They're healthier than town kids, no obesity, no screen addiction. Maybe our way is better. Neither side could convince the other. Then January came, and a shelter collapsed during a storm. May came running to my apartment at 3 a.m., nearly hypothermic herself. 4 people trapped. 1 dead, 3 critically injured. I called Danielle. We responded off-duty, no authorization, completely illegal. We treated the 3 survivors on-site in the freezing woods, crushing injuries, hypothermia, shock. 2 needed hospitalization immediately, or they'd die. 1 we could maybe stabilize. The survivors chose for themselves. No. What hospital? You try, save us here. We worked for 16 hours in that freezing forest, used every skill we had. 1 patient died despite our efforts. Crushed chest, massive internal bleeding, nothing we could do. 1 survived with permanent disability. 1 recovered fully. Someone saw us hiking in with all that equipment, reported it to our supervisor. Jake and Danielle are doing unauthorized medical care in the National Forest. We were suspended pending investigation. The county launched a full investigation, found my journal, found my equipment purchases, interviewed the hospital staff who'd seen me with May. They wanted names, locations. They wanted to bring in social services, law enforcement, the whole system. I refused to cooperate. So did Danielle. We were terminated from Harlan County EMS. Lost our certifications. Faced potential criminal charges for practicing medicine without a license. Seth got word to me through May. They're coming for us. Multiple agencies. We have to scatter. I went out there one last time. The camps were already empty. They'd left in the night, disappeared deeper into the mountains. 23 people, then 80, then gone like they'd never existed. May found me on the trail. She was crying. She gave me a small carved wooden figure, a bird, made by her father. Then she disappeared into the trees. I never saw any of them again. The legal case dragged on for 8 months. Eventually, without patient testimony or cooperation, the prosecutor couldn't prove criminal negligence. The charges were dropped. But my career was over. I lost my paramedic license permanently. Danielle lost hers too. I work construction now, make half what I used to. Some nights I lie awake thinking about those 15 kids growing up in the woods with no education, no future except subsistence survival. Thinking about how we might have helped trap them there by keeping them alive. Other nights, I think about the 27 people who'd be dead if we hadn't intervened. The baby who wouldn't have been born. The teenager with diabetes who'd have died in a coma. I'm Dr. Carla Mendez, and I've been a mobile veterinarian for 12 years now. I drive a converted van with medical equipment, serving farms too remote for people to bring animals to clinics. Cattle, horses, goats, dogs, I treat everything. It's lonely work, but it's honest. Animals don't lie to you. They don't play games. When they're hurt, they show you, and when you help them, they know it. I'm 39, divorced, no kids. My work is pretty much my whole life, and for a long time, that was enough for me. My territory is Wise County, Virginia. Coal country, economically devastated, doesn't even begin to cover it. The farms are scattered across these mountains, families barely surviving on what little they can grow or raise. I had 60 regular clients spread over about 200 square miles. Some of them lived 30 miles from the nearest paved road. You drive through hollers where the cell signal dies, where the GPS stops working, where it's just you and the mountains and whatever's waiting at the end of that dirt road. I liked it that way, mostly. Gave me time to think. Time to be alone. October 3 years ago, I got a call that changed everything. It came through on my radio. I keep one mounted in the van because cell phones are useless out there half the time. Man named Thomas Breckenridge. I'd never serviced his property before, didn't even know he existed. His voice came through rough and uncertain, like he was choosing his words carefully. "Doc, I need help. Got an injured animal. Can't bring it to you. You gotta come here." I get weird calls sometimes. People with livestock they don't want to admit they own, animals they acquired in ways they'd rather not explain. I asked what kind of animal. He hesitated for a long time, long enough that I thought maybe the connection had dropped. "Just come," he finally said. "I'll explain when you get here." The drive took 40 minutes on dirt roads that got progressively worse. Breckenridge's place sat right on the edge of Jefferson National Forest, and it wasn't so much a farm as a compound. Main house, 4 outbuildings, and a high chain-link fence around the whole thing. The kind of setup that says, "I value my privacy" in a way that makes you nervous. Thomas met me at the gate. Man in his 60s, lean and weathered, with a hunting rifle slung over his shoulder. Not pointed at me, but there. "Present," he nodded as I pulled up. "Appreciate you coming, Doc. This one's unusual." He led me to a barn, one of the outbuildings toward the back of the property. The whole walk there, my stomach was doing flips. Something felt wrong. The way he moved, the way he kept glancing at me to make sure I was following. When he opened the barn door, I understood why. Inside, in a horse stall, was a human being. Young male, maybe 17 years old. Naked, filthy, unconscious. His right leg was clearly broken. I could see the angle was all wrong, even from 10 feet away. And he had this infected wound on his side, raw and weeping. I froze in the doorway. What the hell is this? Thomas stepped past me, keeping himself between me and the door. Found him in my woods yesterday evening. Been living wild out there, from the look of him, feral. But he's hurt bad, and I can't take him to a hospital. I'm a veterinarian, not a doctor. He needs a hospital now. This is Jesus. This is insane. I need to leave. I need to call someone. Thomas didn't move from the doorway. Listen to me. There's more like him in those woods. Dozens of them. They've been there for years, and they don't bother anybody. If I bring this one to the authorities, they'll come investigate. They'll round them all up, tear apart their whole community. This boy ran from them, not to them. That means he wants to be separate from whatever's out there. I'm just trying to save one life without destroying a dozen others. I looked at the kid in the stall. He was breathing shallow, his skin pale under all the dirt. The broken leg was the femur, and that infected wound looked like a bite. A human bite. "You need to let me leave," I said, but my voice came out quieter than I meant it to. "I will. After you help him. Then you can do whatever you think is right. Call whoever you want. But at least look at him first." I should have walked out. Should have gotten in my van and driven straight to the sheriff's office. But I didn't. I moved closer to the stall, and the vet in me took over. I could see he'd die without treatment. The infection was spreading. His vitals looked weak. And something about the way Thomas said it, about a community in the woods, about this boy running from them rather than to civilization. "I'll stabilize him," I heard myself say, "but then I'm calling social services. This is way beyond my authority." I worked for 3 hours. Set the broken femur, using the same techniques I'd use on a large dog, cleaned and stitched the wound with veterinary supplies, started IV fluids and antibiotics. The whole time, Thomas stood by and talked. There's a community in those woods, 40, maybe 50 people. Been there since the 80s, as far as I know. They don't bother anyone. Hunt deer, forage, keep to themselves. This boy must have had some kind of conflict, got injured, and tried to escape. How do you know about them? See them sometimes, at the edge of my property. They've never caused trouble. Figure they got their reasons for living how they live. None of my business. Near midnight, the boy regained consciousness. His eyes snapped open, and the look in them was pure terror. He tried to bolt despite the broken leg, made this sound that wasn't quite human, more like an animal caught in a trap. I talked to him the same way I'd calm a frightened dog, low and steady, not making direct eye contact. Eventually, he settled, but he watched me with those wild, unblinking eyes. Thomas tried to speak to him. No response. The boy just stared. Over the next hour, I realized he could understand English. He'd respond to gestures, accept food, drink water when I offered it. But he didn't or couldn't speak. And that bite wound on his side, when I looked at it closer, definitely came from another person. Adolescent or adult. Someone in his community had attacked him. That's why he'd run. At sunrise, they came for him. I heard them first. Movement outside the barn, too coordinated to be animals. Thomas grabbed his rifle, and I moved to the window. 12 people stood at the fence line, men and women ranging from teens to 50s, all thin and weathered, dressed in mismatched clothing that looked like it came from donation bins. They weren't moving, just standing there, watching us. Thomas went out to talk to them, and I watched through a gap in the barn wall. One woman stepped forward. I could hear her voice faintly. "You have our son. We want him back." Clear English. Not some feral speech, just a woman asking for her child. Thomas replied, "He's injured. Being treated. When he's healed, he can choose where he goes." The woman was quiet for a moment. "Then, let us see him, verify he's alive and being treated well. Then we'll negotiate terms." Thomas looked back at the barn, at me. I nodded. What choice did we have? They outnumbered us, and we were holding one of their people. The woman entered alone. She walked straight to the stall where the boy lay, and he recoiled from her like she'd burned him. She spoke to him in a language I didn't recognize, these clicking sounds mixed with English words. He responded in the same language, and they argued, his voice getting louder even though it sounded wrong coming from a human throat. Finally, she turned to me. "My name is Ruth. This is my son, Daniel. Thank you for treating him. May I know what you've done?" I explained his injuries and the treatment. Ruth listened, carefully, asked intelligent questions about the antibiotics, healing time, potential complications. "You have medical knowledge," I said. She nodded. "I was a nurse, 22 years ago. I remember enough to keep my people alive, mostly, but this was beyond my ability. We're grateful." Ruth had been a nurse in Charleston until 1998, got addicted to painkillers after a back injury, lost her license, lost everything, ended up homeless on the streets. "A community of off-grid people took me in," she said. "Helped me get clean. I've been with them ever since. We're not monsters, doctor. We're just people who fell through society's cracks and built something new in the only place that would have us." She explained. They were 12 families. 63 people total, living on public land in Jefferson National Forest. Technically illegal, but the rangers knew they were there and looked the other way, as long as they didn't cause problems. We hunt, we forage, we bother no one. Daniel got into a conflict with another family over hunting territory, got violent. He chose to leave rather than cause more problems in the community. Ruth spoke to Daniel again in that mixed language. Then she looked at me, and her eyes were tired. "He wants to stay with you. Says he's tired of living hard, wants to try the outside world. But he doesn't know how. He's 17, born in the forest, never been to school, can barely speak English. Can you help him?" "I'm a veterinarian," I said, and I could hear the desperation in my own voice. "I'm not equipped to reintegrate a feral teenager into society. I wouldn't even know where to start." Ruth looked at me sadly. "Neither am I. I raised him to survive in the woods, and he's brilliant at that. But if he wants something different now, I have to let him choose. If you won't help him, he'll end up dead or back with us within a month. Please, I'm begging you." I looked at Daniel. He was watching me with those intense eyes, and I saw something in them I recognized. The same look I'd seen in abused dogs, that desperate hope that maybe this person would be different. 3 months, I said. I'll house him, teach him basics, help him get ID and connect with social services. If after 3 months he wants to return to the woods, I'll drive him back myself. That's the best I can do. Ruth accepted. I'll visit monthly to check on him. And doctor, if you need to provide medical help for others in my community, I can pay you. In barter, if not cash. We have needs you could fill. Daniel moved into my guest room that afternoon. First night, I found him sleeping on the floor. The bed was too soft. He was terrified of ceiling lights, wouldn't use the bathroom indoors, refused to eat cooked food. I felt like I'd adopted a wolf and was trying to turn it into a house pet. I started slow, dimmed the lights gradually over days. Introduced cooked food mixed with raw, the same technique I used for feral dogs. Set up an outdoor shower behind my house, let him sleep on the floor with blankets. By week 2, he was tolerating indoor life, barely. The language barrier was the hardest part. Daniel understood English well, but he couldn't speak it. His throat and mouth muscles hadn't developed for speech. I found a speech therapist who'd worked with feral children internationally. She came weekly, taught him exercises. After a month, he could say basic words: hungry, hurt, thank you. But Daniel loved animals. He'd watch me work, completely fascinated. I started bringing him on farm calls, and that's when I saw his gift. He had this instinctive understanding of animal behavior. Could calm a spooked horse with just his presence, handle a fractious dog that I could barely get near. Animals trusted him instantly, and I realized why. He'd been raised like them. He thought like them. I trained him to be my assistant. Within 2 months, he could restrain animals, pass me instruments, follow basic instructions. He was learning structure, learning purpose. And I was learning about his world. He'd show me plants from the forest, explain their medicinal uses in broken English. It was a trade of knowledge. Month 2. Ruth came to visit as promised. She brought 3 others. An elderly man with an infected tooth, a teenager with a broken wrist, a woman with a severe respiratory infection. You said you'd help if we needed it, Ruth reminded me. I treated them in my garage using veterinary supplies. It was surreal, performing dentistry on a human with pliers meant for horses, setting bones with splints designed for dogs. But it worked. Come to our community, Ruth said. Bring your medical equipment. We'll pay you in foraged goods, labor, crafted items. Many of our people need help: injuries, infections, dental problems. We can't go to hospitals without risking exposure and being separated. You're our only option. I refused. Too dangerous. Too illegal. Then Daniel spoke. He'd progressed to full sentences by then, though his voice still sounded strange. Please, Carla. My people hurt. I know them: broken bones, bad teeth, sickness. Ruth does what she can, but you could save lives. You helped me. Please help them. It was the first time he'd used my name correctly. How could I refuse? November, I agreed to one visit. Ruth and Daniel guided me 6 miles into Jefferson National Forest on foot. I brought a backpack full of medical supplies. We reached their settlement at dusk.